Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Jeremy Werner and Derek Piper. Let's switch to a little Illini basketball. We got some recruiting to talk about. We're going to catch up with Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn later on in this podcast as well, so I'm excited about that. But Derek, it's never a dull moment with Illinois basketball, so we'll dive into potential staff news. But how are you, man? Illinois football has been the focus because they're 3-0, but we got to get some hoops chat.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Enjoying this start to the Illini football season. Cannot wait for Friday night. Mentioned this on the radio. It's one of those. I know that you'll be there out in Lincoln. I imagine it'll be just an amazing environment, raucous crowd, such a huge opportunity for Bielema and company. But it's one of those, for those back home, you're texting your buddies, your family, like, where's the watch party? How are we doing this? How are we gathering around the TV to consume this game? And man, just the buzz that will be amongst Illini Nation if they do pull it off. But yeah, it's been a while. There haven't been too many opportunities where you have those opportunities to watch those games and have that hope and see two ranked numbers next to both sides. So enjoying that aspect of it for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like I was trying to think of the basketball comp of this for the 1920 season, but Illinois had the 2022 season, right? Football did. So they kind of had their rival moments already, which Wisconsin was probably the big one there. But I'm trying to think of the comp, like basketball-wise, of what this game is, because it's just kind of one of those games where it's like you can prove yourself, you can assert yourself. Is like, hey, Illinois might be a middle-of-the-pack Big Ten team and maybe program moving forward, which is kind of what the goal was, right? Now, obviously, Brad Underwood was to get back to a Big Ten top tier, which he has. But it's a big game, man. And you got two of them the next week. If you get one of them, you feel great.
No doubt. Yeah, it would be a seismic climb from where Illinois has been to be there in the middle of that pack of the Big Ten, especially in the new reality that is the Big Ten. So, yeah, basketball-wise, that's an interesting question. You go back to that really the previous season, right? The 18-19 year where they had the shocking win at Madison Square Garden against Maryland. They beat Michigan State. So maybe that's one of the games that following year. Is it similar to like at Duke? When they played during COVID in the ACC Big Ten. I don't know. It's interesting.
Number 5 Michigan, they beat in December 11th, 2019, early on in that season. So that was a big one because they were 7-3. They were 6-3 going into that game, but that's kind of when they went on a run. They were 0-1 to start Big Ten play. Then we're 8-2. So that one feels pretty high up there. I forgot. Penn State at one point was number 9 in the country that year, and Illinois went there and won. So that was a big game as well. So, yeah.
That was the Io comeback, right? Io had gotten not the broken nose, but didn't he get banged up in the end of that Michigan State game? We thought he broke his leg. I remember doing that pod from State Farm Center.
Was that the game they were mic'd up? Was that the game they were mic'd up? And
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. That one feels about right. that one or that Michigan game that season. All right, Derek, let's get to a topic that we haven't talked about yet on this podcast because there's nothing official quite yet. But saw the News Gazette. I think it was Scott Ritchie reported that Jeff Alexander, Zach Hamer, Tyler Underwood, all in line for raises, and Alexander will get an extension. Notably not on that list is Tim Anderson. And Illinois had a big recruiting weekend. I got to see most of the staff members on the field. Did not see Tim Anderson. So what can you tell us about the status of Illini assistant Tim Anderson?
Yeah, if you've been following on Illini Inquirer, been able to drop some reporting, some nuggets on that here recently. It's spilled out as most things do onto online discourse and people picking that up, and have gotten asked about it on the radio show as well. So the writing does seem to be on the wall here to have one of the top Mean Streets prospects hosted in Jackson Davis, and to not have Tim around for that visit. And from what I've heard, it doesn't seem like he's really been at Ubben a whole lot here recently. There has been contention from what I've heard. And look, if this does progress into him moving on, which it sounds like that's very real and very possible, and that would be my expectation right now, that maybe we'll get more clarity and details on what exactly happened here. But I think there's been some contention regarding the contract because up until this point, both him and Jeff were on the final year of their deal, and following the Elite Eight, it would be expected that, or hoped for, that an extension and a raise would come relatively shortly after that, or at least you'd have that in the works. So for Tim, a guy that was responsible for getting Terrence Shannon here and one of the best players that we've ever watched in a Illini uniform, imagine that him being such a crucial part of that Elite Eight run, he'd want to be rewarded for that. So I think that was in the mix there. Orlando gets a big paycheck to come onto this staff, and in the range of $900K, $1 million for what his compensation is. So Tim is a rung below that. Again, I don't know what Tim was maybe hoping for in terms of what that contract would look like, but it does seem that, from what I've heard, that he's been discontent with the fact that an extension wasn't done, and then you of course don't know maybe from Illinois' side or Josh Whitman's side what that number would need to be to get that pen to paper and inked and done. So it seems like this is trending towards him exiting before this season, which of course the timing is unideal. And Tim's done good work here. I mean, Merez Johnson, Mr. Basketball, that was one that he locked up really, really early. Ty Rodgers from the Mean Streets program. And really, you look at that Chicago-based AAU program, and it's been rich in talent here recently. It is again in 27 with Davis, Davion Thompson, Howard Williams in the 2027 class. So nothing official as of yet, but as I said, kind of on the front end, it does seem like the writing is on the wall here unless some kind of unexpected resolution comes.
Yeah, and it's a shame, like we don't know enough yet to know what the blame game here should be. But I do think the hire of Orlando Antigua maybe changes the calculus of how much leverage does Tim Anderson have when you add a guy like Orlando Antigua? And then also from the outside looking in, how much will it really impact Illinois? Because losing 2 assistants for the second time in 3 years here, Derek, in the same offseason, it's almost blunted now because you feel like Brad Underwood has earned the trust that when you get a guy like Orlando Antigua to come in, that the program will just keep on humming. And when you have 2 extra recruiters now, and Tyler Underwood and Zach Hamer, they're able to get on the road. But you can't belittle the recruiting impact of Tim Anderson and what he's done for this program. And just like Chin Coleman and Orlando Antigua the first time, what he's meant to this program, and getting a Terrence Shannon, getting a Matthew Meyer allows Illinois to kind of keep the thing going. And now Merez Johnson, Ty Rodgers, obviously a part of that too. So this is a loss. And I guess the immediate short term, it's like, how does Merez feel about this? He seemed pretty all in on Illinois regardless. But also, like, 2027 is a loaded Chicago class. So where they would go from here, Derek, would be really interesting. But I would imagine if Tim Anderson does move on to the end of this, and as you're saying, probably likely, I would imagine they need to go get somebody with Chicago ties, even if we don't think about that as important, because they had a pretty good recruiting offseason when Tim didn't leave his fingerprints on the offseason, right? Like he was a really quiet outside of Trey White offseason for Tim. So maybe that played all into this, but there's a lot of talent in Chicago, and Tim is as plugged in as he's shown over the last couple of years.
No doubt. Yeah, there, as you outlined there's a lot of layers to this, a lot of different angles on really both sides of the coin there. I know that when he was hired that offseason, when you lost O and Chin and Gentry, there was, from what I had heard, a real kind of questioning by Brad of, do I have to get a Chicago guy? Do I need to make sure that there's somebody up there that has the connections that will open the doors there? I think from Illinois' standpoint, it's certainly beneficial when you have somebody that knows the coaches up there, that certainly from an AAU standpoint, to get into, Illinois, as we talked about before, did it really well, where the end with Mac Irvin was a good time to have the end with Mac Irvin with Io. And ultimately it didn't play out as you hoped with Adam Miller. I know he didn't click here at Illinois like he maybe could have, and then pivoting there and getting into Mean Streets with Merez and Ty, and as that pushes forward. So that helps you, but Illinois also could say we're in a different place as a program where there's some of it that sells itself. Like, I would assume when Terrence Shannon should sell Chicago on their own, really. I mean, I know that it maybe doesn't always work that way, but when people
maybe
from
Merez does too, right?
Yeah, especially if he clicks here and has the type of season or seasons that he can have in a Illini uniform. Yeah, I mean, the standard has been changed to where top talent goes to Illinois again. And when they look to the NBA and they see a hometown guy like Io playing for the Bulls and Terrence getting drafted in the first round, obviously the program in general to have the successes they've had. And then NIL is a new wrinkle to all of this, that certainly plays a big factor. But I will say from Tim's standpoint, again, like going up to the Mean Streets and his end with Ty Streets is huge. And really also something that maybe we haven't talked as much, outwardly about is, with all the pre-draft stuff that he has experience with, pre-draft workouts, He's done it for Priority Sports, which is a big agency that has a lot of ties to guys that go in the portal. When you have guys who are transfers in particular, they all have agents. Some of these navigation and discussions are run through their agents. So that was the case with Terrence with Priority Sports. Matthew Meyer was a Priority Sports guy, and Tim got a really good crack at a lot of those players, and even like a heads up of these guys are going to be available. So
and he's a heck of a trainer and developer,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, player development wise, yeah, certainly. I mean, he's gotten the business of Anthony Davis and Derrick Rose for a reason, just to name a few, to work out those guys. So that's another thing. And Brad really likes to hang his hat on ability to develop guys and get the most out of them, add different pieces of their game and refine who they are. And Tim's been an asset there for sure.
We'll talk more about this when we get to know more, when we get to talk to Brad and ask him if this all goes down the way it seems like it's going. But if Tim is done, what's next for him? And short term, what does Illinois do, Derek?
I know a lot of people have wondered about Memphis, and with kind of I wouldn't say shocking, it's just the timing of it, where you have a number of assistants get canned and the notice of allegations, at least that it seems to be going there for Penny and company. Like, Memphis is a program that has a lot of money, is one that's certainly aggressive and trying to get recruits and be relevant. So that could be an option potentially. I wouldn't say that was driving this decision from Tim, at least based on what I've heard, or driving some kind of divide or some kind of exit door for him. So I don't know that that's going to happen. In talking to people recently, it kind of seems like he might take a year off from coaching in the college ranks. Maybe he just wants to be a trainer again. DePaul tried to keep him at the end of that tenure for him, where they had a coaching change and they tried to keep him. And I think at the time he was set on, I'm going to go back to kind of what I was doing prior, which is maybe dabble in the AAU side of things, but really hone in on those pre-draft workouts and just work guys out and have that as his business and be around Chicago a ton too. I think that's really important to him.
Yeah, you and I know, like, he does a lot of community work up there, and it's really, really important to him. So it'll be interesting to see if that's where he wants to go.
Yeah, so he has a number of driving forces, influences that he cares a lot about. So I don't know, admittedly, as of right now, again, this is not final. It's not official as far as what we have heard on the outside to know what exactly he's going to do. But there is kind of that pull to him to stay fairly local. I know Champaign, you're talking 2 hours, but stay in the Chicago area. And he could just work guys out and have that part of his life, and then do what he is passionate about there in the city, which he does a lot of great work there, like you said.
So Illinois, do they just kind of go in with their own guys? It's a little late to go find an assistant, even though Illinois has got a lot of money. Tim Anderson made over $500,000 last year. Deservedly probably wanted more, but what do you expect them to kind of do here, Derek?
That would be my expectation, is that they kind of hold steady, at least the initial indications that I've been given. If this does play out the way it's expected to, that they probably just go into the year as is. And it's a benefit, like you talked about on the front end, to have 5 assistant coaching positions rather than 3, where you lose a third of that if he is to exit, and then you're starting to shift pieces around, guys that haven't been on the court in terms of instruction, guys that haven't been able to recruit. That's different now. Like Tyler Underwood and Zach Hamer, starting with the previous summer, not this past summer, the one before that, were given those capabilities to get out there during practice, and then they can go on the road and recruit. So they've already been doing that. So you can kind of, and you're better positioned to absorb some of this, in my opinion. Now, it's going to be interesting, I think, if you don't have that quote unquote Chicago guy for a whole season. Does that hurt you in future efforts? Does your positioning with the 2027 guys from Mean Streets hurt you there if you don't fill that? But like you said, it would be a little surprising maybe, or just the opportunities there for Brad to make a couple of calls, right? Take a couple of swings if he wants to try to, hey, I know your season starts as ours does in about a month and a half, but what do you think about, I don't know, $500,000 and the opportunity to coach at Illinois as an assistant? Like, I would think that could be attractive, but maybe it should just hold serve for a year and then go into the spring after the year's over and kind of have kind of a full search or full pursuit there, and not really have any restrictions or burn somebody's staff by pulling them away at the very end.
They could steal somebody. Like, they are capable of doing that. Given the success, given the money they have, a guy like Luke Yaklich, an Illinois guy who's unemployed right now, like that could make a lot of sense. But yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll talk more about this once we actually hear official news or get this all confirmed. But it is interesting moving into is the school year.
All right, I want to take a minute to tell you about HomeField Apparel because they are the premium collegiate apparel brand and they're based in nearby Indianapolis. HomeField sent me a few shirts, and what I love about them is, of course, they have incredibly comfortable, well-fitting shirts, but they also have officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. And they have more than 180 plus available colleges, including, yes, your Illinois Fighting Illini. They have great gear for the upcoming football season, so for the warm weather games, check out their Script Illini t-shirt, the Orange Ringer tee, the vintage Oski helmet, or for the fall chillier games, check out the Script Illini hoodie, the Flying Illini hoodie, the Flying Illini quarter zip, and if they're still available, you might want to check out HomeFieldApparel.com for this. Check out their Script Bomber jacket. It is awesome. Also, don't miss their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign. So HomeField is giving away these special football boxes, and these platinum VIP boxes include 3 never-before-seen items from your school that are not available anywhere else. They're curated so fans have new gear to wear all season long, suitable for all weather conditions. And these platinum boxes also include other exclusive items, including a new hat or ringer, a VIP koozie, and a 2024 Platinum Pass, which guarantees 20% off and early access to your school's football releases through the 2024 season. The football boxes are available on August 9th, so these will sell out quick, so go check them out. Go to HomeFieldApparel.com to check out their great selection of Illini gear and use code Illini24, that's all capitals, Illini24, for 15% off. That's Illini24 for 15% off at HomeFieldApparel.com.
And with the school year, Derek, comes more recruiting. And they're trying to take advantage of some Illinois football. It's got some excitement and have some good crowds here. And during homecoming weekend, they had several visitors here. I saw them on the field, including official visitor Keaton Wagler, a 3-star or now 4-star guard. He's been a late riser, 6'6", really good sharpshooter. But Illinois really making a late push here. What can you tell us about this recruitment and why Illinois is really making a big push?
Yeah, he's really one of those off the beaten path recruits. That's kind of the old school way of recruiting prior to just the blow up of the shoe brand circuits and having Nike and EYBL there, Under Armour, Adidas, and a guy that did not play on any of those shoe brand deals. So the exposure is certainly different for him, and probably part of why he's been under the radar, maybe a late bloomer in terms of the rankings and just in general. So, but I know that during the live periods, he had one. Elite 32 is a good event down in the Atlanta area. He also played up in Chicago. In conjunction, there was a Under Armour event up there during the live period in July. So some coaches that were there could then bounce over and see him. I know that Tyler Underwood is the lead for Illinois. He got eyes on him, and a couple of members of the staff evaluated him. They really like him as 6'6", like you said, 50% from 3. His junior season there in Kansas was part of a undefeated state championship team. So I know that Brad has talked about in the past, like winning pedigrees, winning guys that know what it takes to win. That certainly plays to him, and it's part of his evaluation process. So he's a winning player. He's got size. He can handle. He's a combo guard at 6'6". I don't think he's a true point guard, a guy you run all your offense through, but he can handle the ball, push it in transition, do a little bit of ball screen stuff. But a really talented shot maker, and I think as his body develops, can do even more, maybe off the bounce and get into the lane and those type of things. So he's taken a number of official visits. That's what's different now, is that guys can take a boatload of officials. There's no limit, at least in terms of how many schools you want to check out. Schools can host as many as they want, just one per prospect. But he's gone to Colorado State, Drake, Murray State, I think SIU, on the mid-major side, some good mid-major programs in that mix, but some later offers. And then his last 2 visits, Minnesota and then Illinois. And it does sound like it's a Big Ten battle between those two. Minnesota selling Cam Christie. Why wouldn't you? When he's a guy that wasn't super highly ranked. I know he ended up cracking the top 100 at the final of those rankings, but came in 30 minutes a game, all freshmen in the Big Ten, and then got drafted in the second round as a really talented shooter. So it sounds all very, very similar. Illinois, probably more of a development path. Not to say he wouldn't have opportunity to come in and earn a role potentially, depending on how some things shake out. Like if KJ's done after this year going to the NBA, what Kylan does, who we're going to talk to, DGL, how that path looks like. There's not a ton of for sure traffic in the backcourt, especially when you forecast maybe by the time he's a sophomore. But that's kind of, I think, the vision for him at Illinois is develop, work on your body, and then maybe as a sophomore really just jump into an established role.
I just kind of want to do a zoom out here. The class of 2025, they don't have anybody, right? Jeremiah Fears reclassifies, goes somewhere else. But they have a lot of official visitors coming up here. 4-star guard Brandon Lee, 4-star forward Chamberlain Burgess, 4-star wing Trey Maddox. Not the top 50 guys here, Derek, but what do you see as their kind of approach in this class moving into the fall with all these 3 official visits coming up?
Yeah, I think on the front end, before there was, I think some of the pivot has been part of the news of expanded rosters. So there is that in mind, that maybe you take a guy or two who would take a year to develop and see how that works. Now, ultimately, you got to get the prospect to be on board with that and kind of how that aligns with, hey, do I go to the mid-major level or a high major that maybe isn't as successful, doesn't have this load of the roster? I get early opportunity, and then maybe I prove myself to go in the portal and get a big paycheck and then land at a different spot. So that's certainly something that is kind of going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But Orlando Antigua has been aggressive with 5 stars. At least he was. Obviously, Jasper Johnson, Malik Thomas, guys that, Jasper's already committed to Kentucky. Malik's cut his list. Illinois is not on it. Trying to continue to work Caden Boozer, even though it seems like that's a huge uphill climb that probably doesn't have a lot of promise to it. Michael Brown's another 5-star. So they're trying to dabble in still some of that. But outside of it, they do look at maybe down the list a little bit. Trey Maddox, really good athlete out of Charlotte, very long at 6'6", got a 7-foot wingspan. They think he's got an NBA body for a wing, and you're battling some ACC programs there. I think Va Tech, Georgia Tech, Florida State are some. So, yeah, he's going to visit, I believe, for the Michigan game. You have Brandon Lee, who's originally from Puerto Rico, and Orlando's got a lot of ties to him. When you think about his dad was a coach for Orlando when Orlando was still playing. And his dad, Brandon Lee's dad, played at Marquette, was an All-American, played in the NBA. So I think Illinois has had the inside track there. Seton Hall just offered that. He, to this point, until earlier this week, only had 1 high major offer from Illinois. But Shaheen Holloway offered him. He actually coached his brother at St. Peter's, so he's got an in on that as well. But he's visiting this weekend. 3rd in the EYBL in scoring during the regular season. He had some real monster outings. Not the most efficient, but somebody that is a very capable scorer. I'll add in there one other, in Jacob Furphy out of Australia, who, when you have those internationals that don't get ranked for us, but I think Illinois views him as kind of a top 30, top 50 type of prospect. Played really well in FIBA for the Australian junior national team. And he's somebody that Illinois is pretty high on. And I think in their mind, they're thinking about him as, hey, if KJ's gone after 1 year, he'd be a guy to obviously, commit a lot to and think about that opportunity early on. If KJ comes back, then obviously that would be something that maybe he doesn't see the same opportunity and role. So yeah, it's interesting as it stands right now, and certainly ever evolving. And the spring is always in mind too for the portal and what pops late.
I'm saying this, I didn't look it up. Is he related to Johnny?
He's not. No. Surprisingly. 2 Furphys from Australia, not related. But
it's like Smith in Australia. I don't know that. I just made that up. All right, last one before we get to Dre here. Jackson Davis and Jaden Mitchell were on campus, 2 really top 2027 prospects. Derek, good to get those in-state natives here on campus, of course.
Yeah, both were Max Prep's first-team freshman All-Americans last year. Jackson Davis, I loved what I saw from him at Peach Jam. He plays for Warren up there, and he's from Gurney, same high school program as Brandon Paul. So a lot of promise with him in terms of just a really gifted on-ball playmaker, sees the floor really well, plays with great pace. 15 points, 5 assists per game at Peach Jam for the Mean Streets 15U team that's really talented, that made some great noise there. And speaking of Peach Jam, Jalen Mitchell on Brad Beal 16U won the championship. And it was playing with Mika Murinen, a guy that Illinois is recruited now from overseas. But Mitchell, I know that 24/7, I don't know if I don't think we've done rankings yet for the 2027 class, but ESPN and Rivals both have him number 4 overall in the country for 2027. So 6'6", 6'7", big bodied forward, a lot of skill to his game. It's a really good all around game for him. Originally from Albany, Illinois, down south, about 2 hours south of Champaign, now playing in Evansville, Indiana for high school. But Illinois tried to make that similar to a Merez Johnson situation, try to get him on board really early and use that relationship. They were his first offer, I believe, a D1, definitely his first high major offer. Jeff Alexander's worked that one really hard. And you're not number 4 in the country for no reason. Like, he's got a lot of talent. So that's great to have him on campus.
Derek, thanks for the update, man.
No doubt.